Hey, everybody. Welcome to the First CX podcast featuring Kristine Kolodziejski. She's a Microsoft MVP and the queen of UI, at least in my opinion. She's doing such awesome things in terms of making Power Apps look a little less like Power Apps and more like modern apps, which is super, super cool. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, Connor. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on your first episode ever. I'm super excited to have a chat today.
Absolutely. So I guess let's we've got a couple topics outlined here. Let's just dive in and see where this takes us. I think first I wanted to kind of hear about your journey into the Power Platform low code. Like, how did you go from not doing it to being like the queen of UI?
Stop it. Yeah, so it's been quite a kind of long journey, I guess. So I moved from Poland to the UK when I was like 18. I had no university degree, nothing at all, apart from like A levels. And I started a job as kind of business management and did some kind of qualifications in that. And I'd always known that I wanted to work in IT. I mean, my brother and myself have always been into all things tech and stuff. So that was kind of something that I'd always wanted to do. But the thought of trying to get a job in a foreign country with hardly speaking English and not having a computer science degree, as an example, was, I guess, pretty much impossible. So I'd done a couple of boot camps, coding boot camps. I started learning how to code and stuff, and I managed to get a role in the kind of health service, in the National Health Service, which is the NHS in UK, working in what we call kind of proper IT. So, people that work with servers, firewalls, and all of that. And it was so fun. I mean, the team that I worked in was amazing. All of the people were so experienced and they were so patient with me because I knew nothing about firewalls. So it was super fun. I learned so much in such a short amount of time. And we were then doing a deployment of Microsoft 365, and one of the people that we were working with at the time, one of the consultants, suggested that, Kristine, you like doing coding and stuff. Why don't you have a look at low code? We have the Power Platform. And I thought, okay, I'll try and give that a go. So I went to one of the Microsoft App in a Day sessions, which was like 2019, I think. And I hated it. I literally did not like it at all. I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the use case that we had. And I probably shouldn't say this. If I'm not an MVP next time we speak,
Hold on.
So I did that. I really didn't like it. I just didn't like the use case and the way it looked and the way it worked and all of that. And then I think around a month later, we were having a kind of look at an application. So we needed to develop an application that would manage the first aiders and health safety wardens. I think that's what you call them. Fire wardens and first aiders. That's what I meant to say. And I thought, okay, maybe I can try and do that in Power Apps. So I did, and we deployed that, and everyone liked it. And I was like, okay, I kind of like this now. I want to try and do more with that. So I started building more and more applications and stuff, deployed them. Then I was doing some championship and kind of volunteering within the NHS. And I thought, okay, my job is done here. I want to do exactly the same with a customer now. So I decided to make the shift to consultancy. So I worked for a gold partner as a senior consultant, then for another gold partner as a leading consultant. And then I started where I am now as the principal consultant, and I've recently been promoted to technical architect. So it's been a journey, I'd say. I still do a lot of front-end development freelancing in the meantime, and I do a lot of design work in the meantime as well. So yeah, I like to keep myself busy. How about you, Connor? How did your journey look like? Because I'm really curious to always hear how people got into where they are from the start.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting journey. Mine is, so your journey was kind of, you kind of started a little bit more technical, and then you found this low code platform and, learned how to kind of tie that world into it. And I've got one question on that, but I'll answer your question first. So mine's kind of the opposite way, which is interesting. I started from just, being a tech enthusiast to, working my way up to low code and some, kind of some pro code things. So I actually went to college for audio engineering. Like I have a degree in audio production from Full Sail University. Not currently using that degree a whole lot, obviously. But that's kind of how it goes. So for a couple years, and I think this was really up until like 2018. No. It was COVID. So it would have been 2020. Up until 2020, I was working in really in the live industry. So think like concerts, think corporate events, things like that. So I would help a lot with, sometimes I would run audio, sometimes I would, help set up the gear. And I also, one of the companies I worked with, I was helping them in their warehouse. So they had, thousands and thousands of lights and speakers and things. And they were still on a paper system, believe it or not. And I was helping them kind of bring that onto a digital system. They already had a system. They just needed a way to, bring it into the digital system. And kind of what I was frustrated with is there was a bunch of limitations in the system they already had. Like, one of the things that I always preach is the tech should mold to you, right? As a user, you shouldn't be molding to fit the tech. And I think that was my biggest frustration is there's so many little things. Oh, well, we can't do it that way because the tech doesn't support it. Or we have to do, extra steps, 1, 2, 3, because the system has to do it this way, right? And so being frustrated with that, I actually created an Excel sheet that solved one of the issues that we were dealing with. Specifically, so in AV world, there's items that are called serialized items, and that's something that's like unique. So that'd be like this light, or that would be this microphone, right? There's the non-serialized items, and that would be like cables and stuff that like it's the same type of cable, but you don't necessarily need to keep track of like this specific cable. And so that was something the system didn't really support that well. And so I created an Excel sheet to handle that. And I showed that sheet to my dad because I was like, look how cool this is. And he's got pictures and stuff. And yeah, and for years I had no clue what my dad did. Full transparency for work. I just knew he was like in business IT stuff, and that was like pretty much the extent of it. And I showed it to him, and he goes, this is like what I do for work, right? Like basically, this is a power app. And I was like, really? And so I started looking into it, and I watched like a million Shane Young videos, and I kind of rebuilt the entire inventory management system as like my first introduction to the system. I'm sure it was horribly built and designed, but it worked, and it got around some of those limitations and stuff. So that was kind of my journey into low code. And I started freelancing for a couple companies, and then I eventually got hired, and I've been working on it ever since.
Amazing. That is such an amazing story. And the fact that your dad did that and you didn't know, that's even funnier. But yeah, if anything, at the end of this recording, when it goes live, I'm expecting the audio to be perfect, seeing as you're an audio engineer. So yeah, when I watch this back, I'm going to expect the sounds to be perfect. No pressure, but I'm a little rough. Yeah,
Kristine, I'm a little rough. Okay. No, I'm at this point, like, I'm just kind of picky about stuff. I'm not even like that good at it. I'm unreasonably picky about things. That's really the outcome. from the
Nice.
degree. So
I don't. So see, you're the kind of person that says, "I don't like this, but I'm not going to try and fix this." You fix this.
yes, yes, that's exactly. Um, so when you were telling your story, I kind of thought of a question. How did you figure out you could kind of take the things that you learned from your like higher level development experience, like using CSS and HTML and things? How did you learn that you could put that in a Canvas app? What was that like?
Yeah, so the thing is, it's PowerFX isn't quite like HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And even though there's, some similarities between the two, you're still kind of like learning a new language. And I think sometimes people forget when they think of kind of low code, they think, oh, it's easy to learn, anyone can do it. But actually, you are learning a new, what you could call a low code kind of programming language, even though, it's not like a proper code as such. So I still had to do exactly the same as she did. So I was watching Shane Young, April Dunham all day, every single day, learning everything. And I can't be grateful enough to them for doing the content that they've done. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for April in the first place. So yeah, I started exactly like you did. And I knew some of the stuff from Excel, and we know that PowerFX is quite similar in the structure to Excel. But nevertheless, it was just practice. And yeah, the amount of times I've gone to the Power Users Forum or April's videos or Shane's videos, just crazy. But it was definitely worth it. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So yeah, how about you? How did you find it coming from the kind of audio engineering background, I guess? Was it quite tough? I imagine it was your first kind of language you were learning in the first place.
Yeah, like I had and again, like kind of knowing Excel helped. Like I used Excel off and on just for my own finances and different things like that. And I'm just kind of a tech nerd. Like I've always been into that kind of thing. And like one example is in that industry, one of the things you do is you call flat pack. And so if you think about a semi truck, right, they're super tall.
Yeah.
And like cases that you put stuff in are not super tall. So you have to stack them to make sure you're packing efficiently. And so flat packing is basically, you create a base level of cases that are all relatively even.
Yeah.
And then you put a ramp and you roll other stuff on top of it, right? It's called flat packing. And so one thing, there was something, I don't know what it was. It was like really heavy and really big. And so we were like, I don't know if it's going to fit up there. It really needs to go up there, but I don't know if it's going to fit. And so like, this just shows like the kind of person I am. I started like sketching out the dimensions of the ramp and the height of the trailer and used like Pythagorean's theorem to try to figure out, if it's at this angle, it's going to fit or not fit. But I've always just been super into tech and, kind of nerdy stuff. So, learning Excel formulas, learning PowerFX formulas, it kind of came relatively easily to me.
That's good. It definitely came easier to you than it did to me then, because I still have things where I think, this would be so easy with JavaScript, or this responsiveness, I could just do CSS with just a couple of MIDI queries. And yeah, I still, it's a constant kind of journey. You're constantly learning new things and stuff. But yeah, no, it's fun, isn't it? It's really fun.
Yeah, and I think it can help you kind of dive into the more advanced things.
Yeah.
Like especially for me coming from like a no coding background, I think I had looked at like coding courses before and I had dove into it a little bit, but it just didn't click. And being able to start with PowerFX, that clicked to me. And learning that more, I was able to then start learning JavaScript, and now I'm like a little dangerous in JavaScript. Whereas before, like I just didn't understand functions. I didn't understand any of it. So it was a good stepping stone. I introduced you as the queen of UI. So I think we have to ask this question. Why is the design and user experience of an app so important? Why should we focus on that?
Well, that is a very good question. So, first of all, as kind of human beings, we are relatively straightforward. So, the first thing that or the most information that our brains process is visual. So, anything we see is processed by the brain. I think it's up to around 90% of information. Now, if you look at things that we read as an example, the brain only processes around 30 to 40% and only retains around 20%. And the same applies for podcasts or audio as an example in general, which obviously is a topic very close to in general. So we only retain around 50% of what we hear, which is why when when you're a child and your mum says, go and do something, that was my excuse, mum, I only hear 50% of what you're saying to me. I don't, it's not staying in my head. My brain didn't process that. Can you say it again? So, yeah, and I think that's the first thing that we notice. So as long as you don't have any disabilities or impairments that might stop you from processing that information, like a visual impairment, as an example, that's the first thing that your brain will process. And when we open an application or a website, we have our standards that we expect. Every single day we use applications, websites, different software, all of that. And we have an expectation and we're used to a certain way of things looking. So we expect a certain design, we expect certain UX patterns. So we expect for a mobile application, we expect the navigation menu to be on the bottom and those kind of things. So when we go to kind of look at Power Apps, a lot of that is missing, not because people purposely avoid that in general, it's because they haven't gone through the kind of training where like in traditional development training, you will have things like, let's say for web development, you'll have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you'll have design, you'll have accessibility. Whereas for Power Platform in general, people have come from business backgrounds or completely non-business backgrounds in the first place. So they are not doing it on purpose to annoy people or to make things ugly. It's because they haven't had the kind of training to help them even understand how that design works. And as human beings, we're basic. If we see something that looks nice, we automatically build a relationship with that. And that doesn't mean to sound horrible, but if you see, let's say, a good-looking website as an example, you instantly have trust because you feel like the person has to put in work to be able to make it look nice in the first place. So they care about the way, as an end user, you see that application or website. Then it also comes with, if it looks good and I can read it properly and it's legible, it's accessible, you automatically, like I said, you build that relationship with the user. And with the thing that we do as an example, so consultancy, when you build things like proof of concept, and I don't know if that's any different in America, but you have proof of concept, demos, when you talk to a customer, you say, I can do this, let me show you how I do this. Design isn't just making things beautiful. If you add things, let's say like the logo of the customer, it's an application, you use their branding colors, you show them that you care. So instantly they have that relationship with you because they know that you care about their branding, about their corporate guidelines. And like I said, instantly you have pretty much sales straight away. Instantly they think, okay, they really care, but I think we're going to choose them. So design is really important because of so many different reasons. And it just makes the biggest difference. If you compare a nice house and an ugly house, if you were to choose between the two of them, you will likely go for the nice looking house because you have the trust with it. It looks nice, which means there's going to be less maintenance, there's going to be less work, less stress associated with that. And it's just nice and eye-pleasing in general. Yeah.
Yeah. I think something you said made me think about this. I think Canvas apps are a little unique in that they get a bad rap for being ugly, but I think I maybe know the reason based off of something you said is that, ultimately most Power Apps or most Canvas apps come from business users. Think about like the applications that business users have been using for years, right? You always like think about the software like your doctor uses. It looks like a dinosaur, coded that software. Like if you think about where they're coming from and now they're the ones building the app, it kind of makes sense that, people that are building an app for the first time that are specifically, business people, that's probably why it looks like that, is because that's the systems they're using. That's what they look like. They look like, here's a form, enter all the fields, press submit. That's it. There is no UI. It's just forms and buttons. So that's
Definitely. And I think I was just going to say, as an end user, as a business user as well, your first kind of, I guess, primary reason why you're building application, or the primary kind of goal, is to make it work. You don't instantly care about the way it looks. You don't care about the design. You want to make sure that it works. So obviously the kind of design gets forgotten, then the application goes live, and then you think, I'll just leave it how it looks. Who cares about the way it looks? But it really does make a massive difference when it comes to user adoption and generally customer sales, and then speaking to customers and stuff. So I would totally recommend making applications look nice.
What do you think about when you're doing like a mock-up for a customer? How much effort do you put into the UI and the look and feel before you actually build it? Right? Is it, I'm going to get it 80% of the way or not? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's actually a question that I get asked all the time. So sometimes I'll post something on LinkedIn or Twitter, and someone will say, "Oh, Kristine, that will take like 10 days. Customers can't afford to pay me 10 days to just pay for the design itself and then no application." And the thing is once you start, or once you understand the design principles, and once you've done some of that before, it becomes second nature. You don't think about that. I don't necessarily have to sit for 10 days and try and mock up a design. I instantly know in my head, okay, I want to build that. This is how it's going to look. Make sure it's aligned properly. Make sure they have the nice layouts, the hierarchy. You don't have to use CSS to make it look nice. And that's another thing that I'm trying to show, that, it's not just inline styling and the HTML control and SVG that makes your application. It's actually the principles. So if you get the principles, the basics wrong, your application will still look awful, even if you have all of the box shadows, all of the gradients and everything else. So you have to understand the basics. And like I said, I don't add any more time for the design these days, because it just comes naturally, because I do it all the time with applications. I don't have to, I would never suggest building an application and trying to make it over or redo it, because you can see that this is what I do in my series, and it just takes twice as much time, because when I do my YouTube video, I obviously have to build the original first and not try to make it over. Whereas if you do that from the start, you're taking as much time as you would have done if you just did the design from the first place. And it's definitely good to mock something up if you're stuck for inspiration. That's one of the things I hear all the time. There's websites that designers use all the time, or front-end developers use all the time. So you can use websites like Dribble.com, Behance, all of the portfolios, or even Google. Let's say you're building an inventory application, just Google that and just type in inventory management at PY and see how professional designers approach the problem. And don't necessarily copy them, but try and use some of the things that they have used to make your life a lot easier as well. And most designers will tell you that by copying others' work on your personal projects, that's the easiest way to embed the practices that you've been learning about. So if you find a design on Dribble.com that you really like, try and replicate it in Power Apps. You might not be able to do everything, as an example, like fonts and stuff like that, but try and replicate the layouts, try and replicate the way it looks, navigation and all of that. And next time you build an application, you'll find that that's stayed in your head. So you're trying to make sure that you really follow those guidelines that you've learned before. Sorry, that was a really long answer to your question.
No, I think it's a great answer. I think as a customer, or if you're building something internally, I don't think you can afford not to do it, right? Because ultimately, the success of any project that you're working on, or any app that you're trying to build, is customer adoption, or the adoption of the product. So if people don't use it, if they don't like to use it, ultimately, any investment you put in that project is done, right?
Absolutely.
I don't think you can afford not to do it.
Absolutely. And there's also a lot more than just obviously the way it looks. It also needs to be the way it feels. So you then have user experience. Make sure that if you have, let's say, a form, the one thing that I hate is when you have to scroll down a form. I think that's terrible UX in general.
Yeah.
Because if you have a form that you have to scroll down, split that form into multiple steps. Because if you were to just go to like a government website, as an example, and apply for something, if you see a form that has like 100 questions, you're not going to be able to do that on a mobile because that's too much typing. It's not comfortable to do that many on a thing. But you'd also never expect to see like a scrolling form like that because it's just unpleasant of an experience, especially if you're on the mobile phone. You want to be able to see let's say like a progress bar on the top. Tell me how many steps I have left until I complete the form, and don't let users scroll because that's terrible, terrible UX. So it's things like that that instantly improve the way your users interact with the application. And like I said, if you're not sure or you've never had or never done UX before, there's a lot that goes into it. Look at your personal applications that you use every day. So if you go to your mobile, if you look on Instagram, social media, how does that interact? What do you like the most about that you'd want to replicate in Power Apps, and try and do it that way? And it definitely takes time. Don't think that the first app you'll build is going to be an amazing app. And I actually have a video on my YouTube channel roasting my first design that I've done that I cannot wait to do, actually. So yeah, just take your time, just learn, see how people do it. I have so many people that I follow on Twitter that I'll happily share the handles of, but the two kind of people that I've learned the most from is Michał Malevich. I'll drop the handle after the session as well. He's a designer that's kind of is the person behind neumorphism, claymorphism, glassmorphism, and all of that. And his work is impeccable. I just love his quality of work and stuff like that, and totally recommend following him. And the second person would be Gary Simon. Gary Simon is, I've kind of learned a lot from him from the front end development, but he does actually even do UI and UX courses. And again, I'm not an affiliate. I don't get paid for saying that and stuff, but I followed him just to clarify that, because sometimes people will say, she's a shit. And I hate when people promote. Yeah, I hate when people promote something and they don't mention that, and then they just get paid like $1,000 for lying to people, and I don't like that. So if something is advertised on affiliate, I would always disclose that. But again, I'm not affiliated with Gary in any way. I paid for the course myself, and I just thought he was amazing. And he has a YouTube channel as well. So if you don't want to necessarily make any investment, there's a lot that you can learn from the channel itself. And yeah, like I said, inspire yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. It definitely takes time.
Right. Totally agree. You mentioned forms. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the form control in Canvas? How often do you use it?
It depends. It's a very controversial one, I guess.
It is.
I think the problem with forms in general is that, I'm just about to lose my microphone. I think just so you kind of drop. So the thing with forms is they are not very flexible in general. So you have to do a lot of work to make them look nice, and it becomes kind of frustrating, and it has its limitations. I mean, the nice thing about forms is that you can add a button and submit form with just one button with no patch functions and all of that as well. But like I said, there's a lot of limitations around that. So I do tend to use standalone controls quite a lot, just because I can style them the way I want and stuff. But if I'm building something quick, as an example, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with forms as a whole. Yeah, you can still customize them. There's nothing wrong with them. And I think for someone starting in Power Apps, it's probably a lot easier because you only have like one formula that you have to write to submit a form, and then just reset the form. So, there's nothing wrong with them. You can still customize them to some extent and stuff. But yeah, if I was to suggest anything, it would definitely be standalone controls. But what comes with that is with standalone controls, the design becomes a lot more difficult as well, because suddenly you have a free canvas, so you can drop the controls anywhere you want. And oftentimes I will see kind of controls misaligned, and then just looking messy in a way, because like I said, there's no kind of padding and all of that. Whereas in a form, you have the structure. So unless you move them yourself within like a data card, the control will be perfectly aligned to the other controls as well. So there's definitely pros and cons between the both of them. What do you think about forms? Do you like them? To use them? What do you tend to do?
I hate them. Like you said, like the only time, like
out loud,
full transparency. the only time I use them is if I'm just really quickly trying to mock something up or doing a proof of concept. I mean, like, just for the fact alone that you have to unlock a card to edit it, I can't do it. I can't do it, Kristine. I can't go in there and unlock every card.
it is a lot of clicking to get to where you want. And that's another thing, and that's a UX tip that everyone needs
Yeah.
to remember is too much clicking is frustrating. If I have to click 3 times to see a menu, I'm not going to open that menu straight away. And this way you start seeing how good UX is apart from just the UI. The way something looks is can be easily changed, but the UX of an application, how you interact with the app, is not an easy thing to change because sometimes you'll end up having to rewrite the entire application to accommodate better UX. But
Yep.
no, nice to know you hate forms. So do you use standalone controls and Connor?
I do. Yeah.
Is that what you I do?
More often I will kind of style one control and I'll add a text input or something. I'll style that the way I want to, and then I'll add a layout container.
Okay.
And kind of copy and paste that as needed in a layout container. That way I still get the, ease of responsiveness to a degree without, having to add a form, and now I have to deal with an asterisk that's going to show and hide, a label that's going to show and hide. That way I just have more control. But to your point, it's a little bit, it's not the easiest way to start.
Definitely.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. How do you think, what is the best way that you would recommend, I guess, for someone to get started in learning Power Apps?
You can definitely attend an app in a day session that I did, and I hated it. I mean, the content has changed a lot since anyway, and they have a good application that they learn. It really just depends on the kind of style of learning that you prefer. So you can obviously use Microsoft Learn docs, which are fantastic. I think everything is so well documented that whatever you're looking for, you will find in there, and it has a really nice kind of learning path as well. So if you want structured learning, you want to know exactly what you're learning, and you perhaps consider getting a certification as an example at the end of that, Microsoft Learn is the perfect way to start. Secondly, if you already have heard about Power Apps and you've kind of seen a couple of things, you're skilled with Excel, but you don't know, you're still kind of, you're a beginner, but not like a complete beginner. Watching videos, definitely. I mean, like we said, April and Shane have amazing content on YouTube that's available to us for free. We don't have to pay or anything like that. And they spent enormous amount of time building that content for the community. So I definitely recommend that. And I had another one that I was going to recommend, and I completely forgot. I've forgotten. So I would probably say those three things. So app in a day, if you want to learn or get kind of the very basics, do it. Then obviously YouTube channels or Microsoft Learn, I'd probably say. Yeah, how did you learn? What apart from obviously YouTube videos, did you do anything else, Colin? Did you use Microsoft Learn or any other docs?
Yeah, and what I would recommend, and I mean this worked great for me, at least coming from a I don't know how to code background. What worked great for me is I started on Microsoft Learn, like you said. I just kind of went through some of the basic courses. I didn't go as far as I know enough to take a certification, just enough to, understand what the buttons do in the studio. And then really what I did is, and what I recommend to other people is just come up with an idea of something that you want to build, right? And then start building it, use what you learned from the learning documents to get started, and then fill in the gaps with YouTube videos. That's what I did. So I started basic, and then, well, how do I get the selected item in a gallery, right? Maybe that wasn't covered in the learning or something. And so I'll go YouTube that. How do I nest a gallery? I'll go YouTube that, right? So yeah, I would use YouTube as kind of like a gap filler. But for me, the thing that really stuck, because I do see people kind of drop off, they start the learning docs and they're like, okay, cool. Like I have this conceptual knowledge of it, but I don't really know what to do. And then they lose interest, right? I would really, really recommend find something you want to build, and it doesn't have to be for work, and maybe shouldn't be for work, right? Something that like you are passionate about that you think would be cool to build. Find that and try to build that.
Yeah, and that's actually an amazing point. So one of the quickest ways to learn coding or low coding or anything else is by personal projects. So
Hmm.
even if you're learning things like knitting, as an example, you want to do something that that's cool, that you want to
Yep.
wear, as an example. I mean, I'm not good at knitting, by the way, just to put that in there. I'm terrible at any kind of stuff like that. I don't do any crafting. I don't do anything like that. But yeah, so personal projects, like you said, something that you find exciting. I mean, my whole house, all of the lighting behind me is controlled by a power app. Um, uh, some of the things that I've learned that were the most complex were through personal projects. So one of the first kind of apps that I've built that was connecting to an API was connecting to the FBI database. And that was my power app that I wanted to do. And if it wasn't fun, I probably would have just left it because business applications aren't always exciting. It's okay to admit that to whoever is watching this. It's not always going to be a fun application that you're building it. And it's not always going to be, funky. You can't always have all of the animations and design. Do something that you're passionate about. Either one of the things that I have seen a lot as well is people will pick an application like Instagram and try and replicate it with a Power App. And I think that's a great way as well, because you know how Instagram works. So you know what you're looking for, and then just try and replicate that in a Power App. And yeah, personal projects is probably the best way to learn, I would probably say.
Agree. What do you think, like, or I guess maybe for you could answer on a personal level, or maybe what you think in general people might run into, but what is the biggest hurdle when you're learning Power Apps? Is there a particular thing or two things you could think of that once you kind of get an understanding of that, things are a little bit easier?
Yeah, so obviously when you start kind of learning Power Apps and then you start kind of looking at answers and questions, one of the things that you might experience is delegation.
Mm.
See, with, let's say, using SharePoint. And for someone that's not technical, it's difficult to understand what delegation even is, because it could be considered a technical term. You don't understand why the database is processing your requests and all of that. And it can be quite tricky for someone to understand why that's the reason and stuff. And what comes with that is then database management. So obviously, when you start building applications, you start considering SharePoint or Excel, which obviously we know is not the best data source to use. And then you have Dataverse, then you have SQL, and you really get overloaded because there's so much to learn, so many features to learn, that it's very easy to get overwhelmed and overloaded with what you want to learn. And it's very easy to set the bar too high for yourself to start and then leave it behind because you didn't achieve what the unrealistic expectations that you'd set. So I would probably say that's the first thing, that when you build Power Apps, the next thing that you need to learn apart from the PowerFX language is databases and how they work, things like relationships, things like lookups and things. And they are not things that you necessarily do in Excel. I mean, you can do obviously lookups and stuff, but that's not necessarily quite the same as you would. And then you have obviously things like column types, data formats, and all of that as well that you need to understand in the first place. And then the second thing, like I said, is probably the amount of features, because every time you build an application, there's chances that there's something new that you can test. So when you turn on experimental features and stuff, every conference, every quarter, there's always new announcements left, right, and center. And it's very easy to get muddled up with the amount of things that you want to try out. I mean, there's things that I still haven't tried out because I just haven't had the time, because there's so much new stuff coming. And the thing is, like, our platform is obviously Power Apps, which is Canvas apps, then you have model-driven apps, then you have Pages, then you have Power Virtual Agents, then you have Power BI. It's like, wow, when am I going to have time to do all of this? So trying not to get overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that there is and try and take it easy. And then the third thing I would just add to that is the difficult part when you're just starting with Power Apps in your organization will be developers, like pro developers, that will probably tell you low code is no code, I'm not interested, or this is not how we build applications. Now, I'm not saying that Power Platform is the answer to every single question, because it definitely isn't. There's use cases that you can do with Power Apps, but it would be easier or quicker to do with traditional development, as an example, or things that you can do with Power Apps that will require a lot of workarounds or that will slow down the application, so make the UX really terrible because every request takes like 30 seconds and stuff. So Power Apps is not always the solution to the problem. If you run into an issue, it's fine. It's not always going to be the answer. But I would say that sometimes traditional IT people or traditional developers will say things to kind of stop you from learning because they'll say, oh, I can just write that with JavaScript and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that might be the third battle that you'll have to, I guess, face when you're doing it in an organization. Yeah. How did you find it kind of starting with Power Apps? Did you have any battles that you had to face?
So many. I would say
It's all the out.
yeah, I would say that two hills that I think you have to get over, that really are gonna kind of take you over the initial hurdle of like, I really don't know what I'm doing, and I'm having to look up everything, to, okay, I can do this, and then I'll just fill in some gaps as needed. I see the first one, like you said, is understanding databases, right? Once you get a grasp of what columns are, what rows are, what the different types of columns are in relationships, that's really the big one. That's maybe probably the most important part about databases, for you to understand. Because like most people can understand, oh, this is a text field, this is a number field, right? Understanding the foundation is I would say one of the most important things. And the second thing is, I think, patching. Honestly, I notice it when I'm talking to people that are just starting to get into Canvas apps. 9 times out of 10, I'm helping them with patching, right? So I think once you understand how patching works and updating records to a database, I think that's going to take you from 0 to hero pretty quick.
Definitely. No, absolutely. And patching is where things can go wrong as well, because you need to learn how to update an existing record, create a new record, different data types and stuff. And then sometimes you get an error that's not necessarily readable to someone that's non-technical, and you think,
Yeah,
what does that mean? Why did the HTTPS request not work? And then you see like the Azure APM URL, and you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to solve this myself? Like, help.
yeah.
So no, that is a really good point, definitely.
So another switch gears here. When I introduced you, I mentioned you're MVP. Can you explain to some of the audience that maybe doesn't know, what is an MVP, and further, what does that mean to you, and what does it mean to the community?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So MVP stands for Most Valuable Professional, and it effectively means that you have been awarded for your community contributions. So you have been speaking at conferences or creating content like blogs, podcasts, videos, all of that, or you have been helping in the Power Use Forum, as an example, helping people answer questions and all of that as well. And this is how you build up your contribution. So every single thing that you do is what we call a contribution, and that's how you help the community. So the award itself is recognition for the work you've done and your technical leadership. So leading in an area, whether that's Power Apps or a specific type of application, specific type of data, or whatever that might be that you specialize in. It's your own kind of little nest that you specialize in. So you get awarded. So the way things work is, obviously you get nominated by another MVP or a Microsoft employee, and you go through the kind of application process, and then that goes to review to the community program managers. And then based on that decision, you will be awarded or not on the first of a specific month. So even if you get nominated in, let's say, for me, as an example, I got nominated at the end of July. I submitted my application at the end of August, and then I got awarded on the 1st of October. There are people that have had to wait 3 months, as an example, so they would complete the application in August or September and then get awarded on the 1st of December. So it really just depends. In terms of what that means to me, it just means that, the work that I love doing, so like I said, creating content, writing blogs, and speaking at conferences, is recognized. I didn't necessarily do the work, and that's one of the things that I commonly see is people will put something in their LinkedIn title, profile description thing, aspiring MVP or on the road to MVP. And I always suggest against that, because it's not really about the way you put yourself, but it unfortunately shows that you're trying to do the contributions just to get the award. And there have been cases where people have done just that. So they did like 100 blog posts in a month or in a year. They got the award and then they were never to be seen again. And it's also a very quick way to get burnt out. And the last thing you want is to burn out because of community contribution. So only aspire. You can have a dream, you can have a goal. I want to be an MVP one day, but don't do the things you do just to become an MVP, because that's the quickest way to burn yourself out, especially if you have a full-time job at the same time. In terms of what kind of that may have changed for me, I guess. It hasn't really changed that much. And I think that's one of the things that people think, that, you become an MVP and suddenly you're this person that no one can speak to. You're a VIP like Mariah Carey, you walk with sunglasses on, and you're never to be seen, never to be touched, never to be talked to. And to be fair, I do walk with my sunglasses on a lot, but that's not the reason. That's not the reason why. And I think there's this kind of stigma that, that's what it is, when it's really not. You're still part of the community. We are all, I guess, mortals in a way. We're still part of the same people. And it hasn't changed that much. It has changed a lot of things career-wise in the way that I get invited to be able to speak to the product team. So I've been interacting with the product teams directly. I get invited to speak at more events than I did before, and stuff like that. But don't think that this will be, changing your life in a lot of ways in general. And I think that's one of the common misconceptions, that, you become an MVP, you don't have to do any work, you don't have to do anything, you just sit down, just flash a badge or flash like my certificate in the background, I'm an MVP, I don't have to do any work. No, it really doesn't work like that. And don't treat it as your end goal, or like, once I'm an MVP and that's it. It can definitely help you in a lot of ways, but it's not a be-all, end-all. And there's people that don't get an MVP. So there's people that have done multiple contributions and don't get awarded because of whatever that reason might be. And I have seen people that really break down when that happens. And it really shouldn't be like that. It's an award to recognize what you do. Like I said, I love content creation, and that's all it is. You carry on doing what you love doing. Whereas if you do the things that you do just to get the award, you will get burned out so quickly, because you've got the award and now you have to continue doing the same thing that you don't even like in the first place. So that was the very long answer to your question.
No, that's great. That's great. Let's move on to a couple other kind of fun topics. What are not the power apps is not fun. Power apps.
Okay. No, power apps business applications then. No business applications. Right. I'll take my MVP mask off.
Yeah. So what are some hobbies you have?
Oh, that's a very good question. So my first top hobby would definitely be gaming. I absolutely love gaming. And sometimes people say like, oh, you don't look like you like gaming. Honestly, if I could choose a job for the rest of my life, it would be either gaming or game development. 100%. Like, I would not hesitate. If I got offered a job at, I don't know, Rockstar Games as an example, or wherever, to just test games all day.
Oh yes.
That would be like cloud9 for me. That would be the perfect. So I play a lot of games. I have a PC, a console, and a Steam Deck as well. So I play a lot of stuff. If anyone plays on Steam, add me and I'll share the handle as well. We can play together. I can't promise that I'll let you in, but if I do let you in, don't think you've won with me. I just let you in. So I do that, and I'm actually planning to start streaming as well on Twitch in the next couple of months too. So that's the one kind of thing I love. I love music as well. So I play the piano and I play drums. I used to play a lot more than I did. I don't quite play as much as I did. And actually now I've moved houses, my drums are like packed away, which I really need to unpack finally. But I love it. I just find it so fun, and it's super, super exciting. And I love traveling. Now probably everyone says that, but I love going to hot places, which is the reason why I'm thinking of moving to America as well. You can probably hear Alexa in the background. Hopefully you can't hear in the background. If you can't hear, Alexa is just like sitting there. She's like my memory. If you were to just like take out my brain, you would probably just Alexa with like on it, because she carries my life, She does everything I need to say. So I would probably say those kind of three things are my favorite things to do, or my kind of favorite hobbies. How about you, Connor? What do you like doing? Obviously, music, so I imagine you do some kind of music as well.
Yeah. So I don't know if we've talked about this before, but we have drumming in common. I
Hey,
yeah. I actually when I was
wow,
18, I used to tour in a band. So I
no way.
yeah. I'll have to send it to you. I've got a YouTube. I haven't posted a video in a really long time, but I've got a
Oh,
YouTube video
wow.
where I post the drum covers and stuff. So yeah, I love drumming. I play bass a little bit. I play a little piano. I love producing music. I don't get to do it that often.
Amazing.
But I do love doing that. And kind of like as I've become a homeowner and slowly morphing into a dad, I I like really like handyman kind of stuff. Like I love taking
Oh
care of
no,
the
that's like
yard.
the
Like
best thing ever. That's the
yeah,
best thing you can ever do.
I like it
Oh
so
no,
nerdy with
no.
it, Christine. I love it. Like I'm like checking the pH of the soil. Like I get super
Oh
into
no,
it. I
no.
love building stuff. Like we got a new bed over
Yeah.
Christmas, and I'm building our
Wow.
bed frame because all the other bed
Oh
frames I would have to
wow.
sell my leg for.
Oh
Um,
wow. No, I could never do that. No, I don't. I have a motto from one of the songs. I don't cook and I don't clean. That's the two things that I just never do. I literally never do. But the problem is I live on my own with my dog, so I have no choice but to actually make some food, which
Fair enough.
most of the time turns out to be delivery or Uber Eats because, like I said, I don't cook. I don't even have a single pan in the house at all. Like,
What?
yeah, if someone,
I
if
love
someone,
cooking.
if one of my friends said to me, like, Christine, let's have like a baking or a cooking night at your house, I'd be like, I need to
Let me
go
go to
to the
Walmart
shop
real
to
quick.
buy, yeah, I need to buy everything before you can come over. Yeah, so no, these are the kind of two things that I don't do. And I do have quite long nails as well. So like it just that's my excuse to never have to do that.
There you go.
That's right. Yeah. No, I can see how people make like enjoy it, especially if you have your own home as well and you own it, you're kind of contributing
Yeah,
to it. But I just like the life of comfort, I guess. I don't get involved in anything like
absolutely, absolutely.
that.
Um, I think something that could be fun for us to do is I think if we each gave a hot take when it comes to power apps, I think that could be kind of funny. What do you think? If you had one kind of hot take when it comes to power apps, what would you say?
No, I'll let you go first. I'll let you go
Okay.
first.
All right. I have two. I have two. I know I said
Oh
one,
wow.
but I
You're
have two.
bad.
I have many, but these are the top two. That's kind of like that. It goes with anything you love. There's always going to be stuff that frustrates you about it, right? My two biggest things are preview features are always released too early. Um, I know. I think from Microsoft's perspective, they're saying, "Hey, we're releasing this so you can kind of test it out and look at it." But I think sometimes that can create a negative connotation to when Microsoft releases new things because often preview features will just be broken. Like they just like I know that that's kind of the point is for you to test it out and find any bugs. But I think it's just often too early. I think if you're going to release something as a preview, it should do all the things it's going to do in production. It just, maybe is not 100% there, right? The second thing I would say is there's no great way to animate anything in a Canvas app out of the box. You can kind of do some stuff with SVG, which I've seen on your channel. But there's not really a great way to do it out of the box. Like if you tie the Y position of a control to a timer, you can kind of do it, but the polling rate is super low. If you've ever like tried that, it kind of jitters its way
No,
down the
it's
screen or whatever you're
it's
doing.
not pleasant. It isn't pleasant at all because obviously it's based on the timer. So it's not. It doesn't do it every millisecond. It just every second. The animation, it just like you say, it just creates that
Yeah.
jittery effect, which is not nice at all. It makes it look like the application is glitching or just about to freeze. It's not pleasant at all. No, but these are really cool hot takes. I like that. I definitely like that. I definitely like that. My hot takes, I have multiple. I think the first kind of hot take that I have, and it's always controversial because I do a lot in Canvas apps, is it's not always the answer. A lot of the time, a model-driven application will fit your use case so much better and will make your life so much easier as well. If you have a relatively complex applications with like lookups and viewing records, relationships, and all of that, a lot of the time it will be so much easier for you to just use a model-driven application 100%. I know they don't necessarily look the way we probably want them to look, and I know that we can't customize them too much apart from PCF controls, but sometimes it's just so much easier to just use a model an application rather than a Canvas app with like 50 screens and then so much power FX that the application just takes 10 minutes to load. That's the first hot take. The second hot take, like you said, styling is such a pain. I mean, obviously I'm trying to do things with minimal design and showing how you can do things with low code. But like you say, something like animation that really helps the UX, because animations are such an easy way to save you time and save the hassle. So if you have a record that's taken, let's say, 20 seconds to load or 10 seconds to save, if you have an animation like a loading screen, instantly your users are entertained. So they don't feel like they've waited like 10 seconds for something to load. And it's one of the quickest ways to improve UX. Definitely that. I mean, the controls in the applications are quite dated. We haven't had a refresh since like 2017. And we definitely need more modern looking controls in general and different types of controls as well. Because some of the controls look still dated. Even if we get a refresh like a drop down as an example and stuff, there's still a lot to be done. And the fourth hot take, I guess, the last hot take, I promise, is Power Apps and Power Platform in general is not always their solution to your problem. As much as you'd want to fit every use case, sometimes there will be times, very rarely, but when the Power Platform will just not fit, where you have to succumb to those pro developers that you might not necessarily like that will build the application from scratch. But sometimes that is just the only way to do it.
Yeah, external users. That's always the big one. Is like
and
that's need to be involved. Like
another thing. Yeah, that's another thing. I think it would be so much. And I know we can have Power Pages, but they are not necessarily applications. They are more websites like applications. And Power Pages still require you to have coding knowledge because you have Liquid, you have CSS, you have Bootstrap, and all of that. And it's quite intimidating for someone that's not done that before. So I think, like you said, if we had the ability to be able to publish the application to like an app store, like an Apple App Store. And I know there are ways to do similar things, but that's not quite the same, where you can just say to your customer, I've added to the App Store or something equivalent of an App Store. Download that from there on your mobile phone and you're good to go. You're paid for, you don't have to worry about licenses and all of that, but that would just be the dream, unfortunately.
There
can't make that.
There's a way to take a Power App and convert it into like a native iOS.
Yeah, there is.
But I tried it and I couldn't. Yeah. I mean, I'm a dummy, but like I couldn't figure it out. It was and it's pretty new, so like, you know, the documentation's probably not quite as thorough, but I couldn't figure it out.
It's actually quite difficult to do it. I've only done the Apple one because you have to do it separately for Android and
in the everybody just talks about the Apple one. And I'm like,
yeah. So I've done it for iOS and it takes ages to do because there's so many things you have to remember and stuff. And sometimes I don't think it's quite worth the hassle, if that makes sense, because I sometimes I just don't think it's kind of worth the amount of time you have to do it. I understand why you have to do it because obviously there's a lot of technical implications, but then it makes it difficult for a customer that's using Intune as an example and managing the applications you can download. There's so many things that you have to think about that. It's definitely not something that I haven't had to do for a customer. I've done it for a personal project to test, but I haven't done it for a customer just yet. And
makes sense. What is, well, I guess kind of reflecting on our hot takes, what's one feature you would add to the Power App Studio if you had total control?
I know people will hate me for this because I always get like people pushing back on this, but CSS support would make our life so much easier in so many ways, and not just making applications look beautiful and stuff, but even simple things like responsiveness. The fact that you have to assign properties to every control and stuff and everything else. Responsiveness isn't just scalable design. And that's one of the things that I'm doing a video on as well is sometimes I'll see people where they put like an application in play mode and the text input will just expand to most of the screen. That's not responsiveness, that's scalable design. Responsiveness is when you have a desktop application and you put that onto a mobile phone and it has a different layout because you have to accommodate for the screen. You're not just putting everything in one container and just like cramming it in it, a completely different way of interacting with things. So by having CSS support, like we do in Power Pages, where you can open Visual Studio Code directly from the browser and see things, I think that would be a life changer in general, I think. And also another one, and I know people are going to hate that, but the ability to be able to build custom controls directly from the application without having to use PCF controls, I think is another thing, because PCF controls in general are amazing, but there's so much work that goes into them. ALM is a pain with PCF controls. If you need to update them, you need a pro developer. To be able to get to the code, you have to unzip it, look at the manifest files and all of that. It would be so much easier if we could just build our own custom controls. Let's say a text input with just HTML and CSS and JavaScript to collect the data. It would just make life so much better. But I know I'm asking for a lot there, and I don't think Santa will bring it this year, but maybe next year.
I agree. I don't think it's gonna come, but I mean that would be awesome. I've tried to build a PCF control like 4 times and it failed every single time.
Yeah.
One day I'll get it, but I think for me, the one thing I would add is an animate function. I would say like a function where you could pass in like some kind of trigger variable that lets it know when to actually do the animation, like a start value, end value, duration, and then, like a ramp style or something, so it can kind of, smoothly give it momentum when it's changing those values. I think something like that would be just so cool, because then you can just simply, in your Y value, X value, whatever, add your animate function, and it'll give you that smooth kind of animation that a lot of people are looking for in Canvas apps. It's not necessarily something for, like a citizen developer, but I think it could, to me, that's a simple way to do it, and I think that could add a lot of value to the platform. To me, that's like the one thing. Not being able to do traditional CSS and not being able to have, solid animations, at least out of the box. Like you said, you can always do it with PCF, but being able to build that out of the box, like those are the biggest separators to me between like a full scale, modern pro code app and Power Apps. That's really the separator. And if we can bridge that gap, it's going to make the platform that much more competitive.
Yeah, and it's just to close that off. It's really funny you say that about animations as well, because it just shows, just answering my question from before, how important user interface and experience really is. Yeah. And you forget about that. And the fact that you want to have the animations to be able to give them to users is just evidence that, it's really important. It's really important for your end users to have good UI and UX.
Absolutely. Well, Kristine, I think that's all the things we wanted to go over today. Thanks a million for being our first podcast host on this, by the way, unnamed podcast. I got to figure out a name for this thing. Who knows? We'll figure it out. It'll be up here somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a million. I loved the conversations. As always, it's great chatting with you.
No, thank you so much, Connor. Like I said, I'm super honored to be the first guest on your show. I can't wait actually to see what name you come up for the podcast, and I will definitely be looking out for the future episodes as well.
Absolutely. All right, Kristine. Have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
Yeah, thanks.